We'll call a meeting to order. This is the Tuesday, August 25th meeting of the Planning, Resource, and Development Committee. The roll call looks like from the screen that everyone is here, all supervisors are here except for Supervisor Morehouse. And I did get a note from her that she had some family business that might require her to miss the meeting. So she's going to try and get on, but she may have to take care of that ahead of the meeting. So otherwise, we also have the county board chair, Dave Bartlett, on. So we have a quorum. Approval of the minutes for the August 11th, 2020 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
This is Supervisor Kinnear. I'll move to.
Is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork, seconds.
Thank you. I would make one note on here. I think at the end of the meeting, or somewhere in the minutes, we talk about number D, the legislative agenda, and we talked about bringing that back for a final review. Morgan was going to submit a couple of additional items, and we were going to maybe have a chance to wordsmith it. The administration had asked that we forward those after our meeting in order to give them time to bring all of them together from all of the committees and look for consistency and that sort of thing. So that's happened already. So the resolutions that we approved at the last meeting have been forwarded onto the administration, and they will be considered, I'm guessing, Paul can correct me if I'm wrong, at the executive committee meeting in September. So we'll all have a chance to, in that packet, to take a look at them. And if there are any changes that we'd like to suggest, we can talk to executive committee members about them at that time. So that's just a note. We have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions or additions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, carries. We have no public hearing today. And we have an item on the agenda, number 7A, ENS 2020 budget adjustment, that Mr. Straya is on to talk about. And so in the interest of his time, without objection, I would move that item up to the top of our action agenda. So before we do staff reports, maybe do that. Anyone object to that? Okay. Dan, are you gonna introduce that?
Yes, this is a technical assistance grant from National Association of Conservation Districts. That's our national organization that represent us a lot in Washington. And they've been working, if you remember back in 2018, we applied for and were approved for a NACD technical assistance grant. But they are getting this money from NRCS, and then they are offering it to counties across the United States for grants to help NRCS with implementing conservation. And I sat down with John Sipple back in May, and we talked about what he felt really wasn't getting done, and that was taking people that were in the EQIP program and they'd been getting cost sharing for no-till and cover crops, and actually following up with those farmers to see how those practices were working. And so we put in an application, or I put in an application, and then about halfway through the review process, they contacted me and asked if we could expand our application from the EQIP program to the CSP program, Conservation Security Program. And John said, yes, we sure could do that. So we have this grant application is it's providing about $50,000 for salaries to implement, to go out and work with farmers to look at how their cover crops, how their nutrient management, how their no-till is working, and talk to them about how they're going to terminate those cover crops. And our original plan was to have, the soil health specialists do this. And when we had the opportunity to amend this, I wrote it so that it could be a little broader, so we could use some of this money to reimburse our current staff for doing this. And I could step back a little bit here. The original intent of the program was to hire new people, but they also were looking for chances to partner with existing programs. And seeing our lake protection grant expires next year, it fit real well to blend this in with our current grant program. So I made the application, we were accepted, and the actual grant has started already, but we need to amend the budget to put this money in it. So it's $47,500 for the attendance hours, $500 for training, and $2,000 for supplies. And it's a very easy grant to administer. At least it was in the past. We do quarterly reports of the progress and time spent. So.
Okay. Mr. Stray, do you have any comments or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee, for moving this up.
Are there any questions from the committee members?
I think Keith was muted at the
Keith,
time.
I
Keith
can't
have something?
see.
Can you hear me now?
Keith, I think you're muted maybe.
How about now?
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize for that. Yes, thank you, everyone, for moving this up on the agenda. No, this is a pretty straightforward grant. The timing of this is perfect to receive in that we can adjust the 2020 budget. It also has an impact to 21, so we can get this through the process and include that, the impacts to the 21 budget as well. And I totally support it.
Okay. Any other questions? David.
Supervisor Kinnear here.
Go
ahead,
I think Dave Bartlett had his hand up first. Maybe David.
Not necessarily a question on this grant, but Dan made the comment that the lake grant is going away next year. Did you mean for 21 or for 22?
This will ensure that it's fully funded through 21.
All right, thank you.
And I intend to apply for another lake grant in November of this year to continue that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then if things work out, this year could become the match for that new lake grant.
Okay. Supervisor Kinnear.
I have a question for Dan. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dan, these things that you said weren't getting done, it really sounds like a good idea. But they weren't getting done because you guys are busy. So how will they get done now?
Well, I got an email and I talked to the county conservationist in Marathon County who's been has 2 or 3 of these grants going at one time. But basically what John and I have sat down and worked out is that when Steve is working, our soil health specialist is working with people in the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers area, he will also talk to them about their EQIP practices. And when I rewrote this amendment to the grant to include the CSP program, Amanda will do the same thing when she's working in the Hay River, and she will pick up and specifically note that realizing that these people, and Travis is going to do the same thing when we're in the town of Wilson with farmland preservation. And if there's somebody in farmland preservation in the town of Lucas, we're going to be doing 2 things at one time. So I think this is going to strengthen our relationship with NRCS, and it's going to help us out because we have to be out there for farmland preservation, and then we'll be able to coordinate. John's going to let us know who those landowners are, and we will be able to get it done that way. Mm-hmm.
Well, Okay, it sounds like this could be done continuing forward even without a grant. So the same people are doing a little more while they're out there, is that it?
Mm-hmm. The big issue here is that the soil health specialist, is definitely only in the watershed. That's where he has to spend 90% of his time. This NACD money would allow for this to happen with the other conservation planners and even some of his time outside of the watershed also.
One last question. I'm sorry if I'm sounding skeptical, but I think it's a great plan. But I'm just wondering why they haven't been doing this all along if they can all of a sudden do it now.
That's a good question. And to an extent, we have been doing this some, but not making a concerted effort to do it. Let's put it that way. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anything else? I would need a resolution to approve the ENS budget resolution. Anyone care to make that motion?
I'll
Supervisor Bartlett?
make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Supervisor Bjork.
Supervisor Bjork, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Keith, for your sitting in.
Thanks again.
We'll go back then to our regular agenda order. And the first item is Kyle Bammert, who has been our summer intern and has put together a presentation, as we usually have a presentation on the work they've done over the summer. So we will try and patch Kyle in here and the presentation and take a look at that.
Hello, Kyle. Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I will run the slideshow for you. You just stop me if I get too far ahead.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to advance slides, and you will have to do the narrating. So, is there anything on this slide?
We still see the
We
agenda.
can't see it yet.
Can't see it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me redo this.
I can just like pause or tell you to go next, but yeah. Anyway, hello everybody. My name's Kyle. I go to UW Stout. I'm gonna be a junior this year, and I'm majoring in environmental science with a concentration in natural resource conservation. Over the course of the summer, I've gotten to work with a bunch of different groups in Dunn County, including the NRCS, Dunn County, the Lower Chippewa Invasives Partnership, Landmark Conservancy, the Alliance, and the DNR Wildlife. So I'm just gonna give you like a brief overview of like what I did with each group this summer. So I spent a lot of time with NRCS. One of the first things I learned how to do this summer was do a field compliance check for highly erodible land. In these pictures, you can see that this land is eroding fairly a lot, kind of. The water is kind of running down the side of the waterway instead of through the waterway, and you see it's like cutting down a couple inches. And through doing these compliance checks, I've learned how to shoot the slopes and also like count percent residue of the fields. Next. I've also had the responsibility of completing some wetland easement monitoring for NRCS. I really enjoy doing that because you get to see some beautiful places in Dunn County and western Wisconsin in general. they essentially are just protecting these wetlands forever and making sure there's no encroachment from other fields and things like that. And I got to also learn how to identify wetland plants, which I haven't had that much experience with, so that was cool. And then I've also went out with the NRCS on some prairie restoration sites that they're helping to fund. This site in the pictures here is pretty early on in the restoration process. So it takes like 3 to 5 years for like a prairie restoration to be complete. And this one's a little early on that process. So there's still like a lot of weeds and stuff in it. But I thought it was really interesting learning about how these prairies get established and how they're maintained. And you can see in the left picture, a bird made a nest in between like the stems of a bergamot plant, which I thought was really cool that it's like being used as habitat like fairly soon after it was established. On the next slide, I got to spend a lot of time with the NRCS on their construction projects around Dunn County. This was something I was really pretty interested in. I got to learn how to use the GPS to stake out points and then to find them later, which is like how they help design all of these structures that they build. I also got to learn how to use like a laser level and kind of like what goes on behind the scenes of each design. On the far left side picture, you can see that is a almost completed waterway that is being built, and in the middle is a almost completed dam that was built. And on the far right hand picture is a wetland scrape that's in the process of being made. So that was really cool to be able to see how things worked from like start to finish on a project. I also was able to go out with Dunn County people on some of their construction sites that they run. I got to see and learn how they put the pipe through the dams. And I also got more exposure to the laser level there. I also spent a day with the Dunn County surveyors, and that was really interesting because I got to learn how section corners were set when Wisconsin was being settled and how they're set today. I also got to witness them resetting a corner that wasn't set correctly. And on the far left right hand picture is a section corner that we found that was like an old metal like beam, which I thought was pretty cool, so I snapped a picture of it. On the next slide, I got to do some water sampling with the county in the watersheds at the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers farm. And I got to learn how to take a water sample and had a really good time doing that. So if anybody needs any water samples, let me know. I'm more than happy to help out. With the county, I also went to a soil pit investigation for a proposed new waste structure on a hog farm. On the far left picture, you can see that that's the old waste storage pit, and it's really full and needs to be a new one be rebuilt because it's probably not up to code anymore. So I got to learn like why they do soil pit investigations and to see where they're going to potentially build a new structure. I also spent some time with the Lower Chippewa Invasives partnership this summer. I helped them out by filming some plant identification videos that help people to identify native and invasive plants at home, so they don't have to congregate in like a classroom-like setting and in this COVID era situation. I also learned how to use this app called EdMaps to map invasive species in our area, and those reports are used to help the county highway departments know where the invasive species are so they can help control them better. And my work through the LCIP has helped me be able to identify a lot more different plants, invasive and native. And I've also done some work with the Landmark Conservancy. I did some park maintenance at a park you guys are probably familiar with, the Devil's Punch Bowl, and I got to learn what goes behind maintaining a park of that size. I also got to do some easement monitoring for Landmark Conservancy, and those easements were really cool to monitor because I got to go through like Chippewa County and Jackson County and Trempealeau County, and they have some really beautiful property that they're protecting, so that was really interesting. I also got to spend a day with DNR Wildlife on talking to Missy Sparrow about their prairie management practices in the Dunnville Wildlife area. I learned about the different management techniques that are being tried, and they're experimenting with different mowing techniques, and now they're going to try summer burning, which I found pretty interesting. Apparently summer burning is supposed to be like a less intense fire, but also control woody brush better, so it'll be interesting to see how that works for them. I also helped out the Alliance this summer by prepping some signs for Dobbs Landing to help encourage people to not drive like their four-wheelers places, and I also helped spray spotted knapweed and pull it there at Dobbs Landing. And I also helped out the Alliance by conducting invasive species surveys with the leader of the LCIP for 3 Alliance properties, so they have like a better idea of what species are there and what to do with those properties. One of the first projects I did this summer was a bug collecting project. I went to local streams, mostly Elk Creek, to collect macroinvertebrates, and I cast them in resin, which was pretty cool. And that these were to be used for a future educational event, and then I actually got to use them this summer and teach summer school kids about macroinvertebrates and like how to identify them and what sort of bugs indicate like what water quality level. So that was interesting and fun. And I also worked on a field monitoring project this summer, monitoring 5 no-till fields in Dunn County. Doing this helped me learn the different ways that no-till looks in different practices and different ways you can do it. Some of these were no-tilled into cover crops. Some of them were no-tilled into like corn or like weeds. And the one on the far right is corn that was tilled, or not tilled, but no-tilled, planted into a crimped rye field, which was pretty cool. This just like helped me learn more about like soil structure and the different ways that no-till farming can impact soil structure. I'm not sure if I really came to like any sort of like big conclusions or big ideas through this, since I didn't really know what I was looking for to start off with, but I've definitely gotten better at identifying like if soil like looks platy or if it looks blocky or stuff like that. One thing I've also learned during this project was that no-till farming takes a while to be able to like have an advantage over tilled farming. These pictures are all from the demo farm in Dunn County from roughly the same spot. And on the left side is like a tillage strip. So they till that every year to compare what they're doing to their non-tilled side. And I'm pretty sure the no-till side has been no-till for like at least 5 years, if not like 7. And you can see like the differences in height, especially early on, how like the no-till corn looks kind of taller and like more green than the tilled corn. So that was interesting to see that there is an advantage to no-tilling, but it does take a while for you to establish that. And that is basically everything I've done this summer. Here's like a short list of the things that I've learned. But yeah, overall, it was a really great experience, and I'm glad I did it. This is my first internship in the field of that I kind of want to get into, of like environmental science and conservation. So it was really interesting. I know that was probably too fast, but
That was great. Thanks a lot, Kyle. It was really interesting. Any questions or thoughts from anybody?
It's Mike Kenner here. It's hard to believe you could do all that in one summer. That's a great job.
Yeah. You really saw everything. That's pretty impressive. Thanks a lot for the presentation. It's really helpful to us. Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Jim.
Supervisor Anderson, I want to commend Kyle. I am also on the Chippewa, Lower Chippewa Invasive Species Board, and I saw some of the great work you were doing there, Kyle, and as well as the others. My question, so nice job. My question is, with the Red Cedar Demonstration Farm, every year, you know, we all drive by that and watch the progress. And sometimes we've had a field day, spring, summer, fall, depending upon what we want to show the public. Are there any plans for a field day or on the Red Cedar Demonstration Farm this year? Thank you.
Dan, you want to take that?
I can answer that, I believe. Right now, Jim, unfortunately, there are no plans because Katie said that the UW extension people that we usually have come and speak from Madison cannot leave town, and extension is not having any events. So we did not plan one there. We are still planning a field day at Tristan Byers in the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers and at Jeff Lakes in the Hay River farmer-led watersheds. But we did not plan one on Katie's recommendation, I guess, at the Red Cedar.
Thank you, Dan. That was my understanding. I just wanted everybody to know.
Okay.
I'm glad. Thank you.
And I guess I would just like to say I really appreciate Kyle's patience this summer, because with COVID-19, it's been hard for him to schedule time and to get out on projects. But he was able to be housed at the NRCS office and use their vehicle and get around. We did our best to get him on projects. And his position is funded by the Alliance of Dunn County Conservation and Sports Clubs, which is an organization made up of all the conservation and natural resources organizations in the county. And it's been great working with Kyle.
Any other questions? Any other questions, comments? Great. Thanks again, Kyle. Look forward to seeing you around. Next item on the agenda, review of the draft land division ordinance. Tom and Nick will probably take care of this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We are getting down to, I guess you could say, fine polishing of this ordinance. I don't expect a lot of discussion today. What I can do is give the committee an update on changes we've made since the last meeting. So I will go down to page 9. And actually page 9 here isn't so much a change, but it's one of those areas where we bookmarked to come back to further discussion. You may all remember section 16.10, division of plat by high value agricultural land. At the last meeting, I guess there was some discussion on the verbiage, the section title here, header, high value ag land. I don't know if the committee members have given any more thought to this, but again, I'm flagging it as one of those areas we wanted to come back to. So I'll turn it over to the chair at this point.
Yeah, I think we talked about some different options. We haven't made any actual suggestions for changing this at this point in time, right?
No, not that I'm aware
So
of.
we will be looking at this just by background, probably one more time after Tom's going to talk about, I think, the review, the state review, but we should give some thought as individual members to if there is a better way to describe what we're trying to get at here with regard to high value. I mean, maybe it's fine the way it is because it is sort of, it is expanded in the statements, but does anyone have anything today they would like to suggest?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Paul Miller. Prime agricultural land is another common phrase, although that also sometimes carries with it a specific designation from one of the other agencies. But just for consideration, if high value is a bit amorphous, prime agricultural land is an option.
Right. We talked about, I think we talked about productive and the also as option, and was pointed out that there are a lot of fields, land that is in agricultural use that is, you know, maybe not as not really high value, but still useful to, and we'd like to keep it in agriculture. So productive agricultural land would be another option. Anybody else have thoughts? Well, let's just keep these in mind, and we need to take, Tom, are you okay with us coming back to this again?
Yes, and actually, I don't want to speak for Corp Counsel, so if he has other thoughts on this, he can certainly chime in. But my thought is we'd come back at least one more time with this. Approximately 10 days ago, I sent a draft of this ordinance down to Renee Powers, the Director of Plat Review, Department of Administration in Madison. They routinely review ordinances for local municipalities, give their suggestions, comments, feedback, and I haven't heard back from Renee, but they're in the same boat as we are. They're very busy. In some instances, staff are working from home, so they're doing the best they can. I will follow up with Renee shortly here, but I certainly would like the state to review this draft as well and make sure that they don't catch anything in here that's contrary to state law, or maybe have some suggestions we haven't thought about. So once I get those comments back from the state, then I would like to incorporate any of those into this draft and bring it back at least one more time for the committee's review. So whether that be in 2 weeks, hopefully 2 weeks, if not, certainly within, a reasonable amount of time.
I agree.
Okay, thanks, Nick. All right, then let's let this go for now, but understand that we have several more, or at least have one more informal option to suggest revisions going forward.
And there are other sections, Mr. Chair, so I would like to continue. Okay, so moving on, we're going to move down to section 16.42. This was a section we made a few minor changes in. So it didn't come through on the copy you have, but the word wetland right here, if you can see by my cursor or my hand, we added that word in there, wetlands. Prevent the degradation of existing wetlands. I think Supervisor Kinnear had made a comment at the last meeting about that. So we added wetlands there. And then, of course, the changes here now we're tracking in red. So we added natural lines. So we're going to ask for easement or drainage right-of-way conforming substantially to the natural lines of such water course. In other words, we don't want the developer to drastically alter the site and run the water in a different area other than where it's naturally running. And we removed the last few words here of that paragraph. Down here, we struck the word meadow and added woods grass, which is consistent with the table 16.42 below. Talks about the pre-settlement conditions as being woods grass combination. So that verbiage just tightens that up a little bit better, makes it a more consistent. Moving down to 16.43, and if anybody has questions, you know, I'm going to go through this somewhat quickly. If you have questions, feel free to stop me. Down here we added the
Tom, Mike Kinnear.
Yes.
I just have a question. 16.43A, the 66-foot width, I understand. Does that provide so that if we had parking on both sides, that emergency vehicles could get back and forth through that area? I'm not quite sure how large that is.
Well, there's no guarantee. I mean, if say we have a 66-foot road right away, and somebody has a graduation party and there's 200 cars parked on the road, and some of them are quite wide or maybe have a trailer behind it. Yeah, in no way does this guarantee that emergency access vehicles are going to be able to get through given certain conditions. But 66 feet is a typical public road right-of-way width. It's a commonly adopted best management practice standard. So it allows for certain width of paving, for ditches, for movement of stormwater, for vision, things like that.
Yeah, I understand that part. Thank you for reaffirming that. So is anything in this ordinance allowing us to say, hey, in your subdivision, we want you to have just one side parking? That came up in this other one, so I'm asking that just in general.
Yeah, to answer your question, simply no. This ordinance does not give us the authority or require a land division or a subdivider to restrict parking to only one side of the street. It does not.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chair, would we be able to put something in there for certain subdivisions like a cul-de-sac, excuse me, where there potentially could be parking on both sides of the road to add like 16 feet to that right of way to ensure that there is adequate parking along with the width of the road and a 2-foot shoulder between the parking and the road for emergency vehicles?
I'm just going to chime in. I think we're dealing with two things here, at least in my mind. Right of way is one issue, but the actual paved driving surface is another issue. So if we're going to require a wider right of way, that's fine, but I think we'd want to be very specific and talk about the paved lane, because we could have a real wide right of way. Say we went to an 80-foot right of way, but if the developer only puts down 11-foot wide paved lanes with 2-foot shoulders, it doesn't solve the problem. There's no place for cars to pull over, especially if there's a ditch there. So I think we'd want to be very specific and talk about the paved driving surface.
And I agree to that, but I guess thinking about the width of our roads out in the township when we're building with a 66-foot right of way and a ditch on each side, I don't believe there's enough room to have a, say, 20 to 22 foot paved roadway, a 2-foot shoulder on each side, and then a 8-foot parking lane on each side if you have a 66-foot right of way.
Correct.
And if we don't have an option for a wider right of way, I don't think there would ever be an option to ask for paved parking lanes on each side on a cul-de-sac. I guess, I don't know. I'm just, I'm asking, I guess,
Correct.
more than anything.
If you're going to need a wider driving surface, then in turn your right of way would have to be wider as well. And we certainly could come back with something, perhaps consult with our own highway department on some standards and adopt some draft verbiage here for the committee's consideration, if that's the direction you're giving us.
I think that's what we're hearing. It's been brought up several times, so let's try and do that, Tom.
Okay, duly noted.
That could be done as an option in developments in which it is deemed to be necessary for safety reasons, right?
Right. Okay, I am going to move on. In item 2 here, line 813, it was an oversight. The word roads was not in there, so that was inserted. Nick and I spent some time reworking lines 821 here, 822, basically section 3A. So private roads, except for provided in a section up above, are only allowed on certified survey maps and shall meet the following requirements. So no more than 4 lots. We tried to make this crystal clear, black and white. No more than 4 lots may be accessed by a private road. Right-of-way width shall be a minimum of 66 feet. A variance from this requirement may be granted based on undue hardship. The old verbiage, we were allowing 33 feet for any private road for up to 2 lots, no more than 2. And then further division of lands resulting in more than 2 with less than 66 would not have been approved. And then 66 feet would provide access from a public road to no more than 4 lots. It's just, as we read that and reread it, it didn't sound right to us. And the whole 33-foot wide concept, we just thought is potentially going to create problems down the road. So I carve out 2 lots, and let's just say they're each 12 acres. Down the road, those lots can be divided again. Well, if I only have a 33-foot easement coming in there, something less than 66, it would prohibit me from dividing them. And then we could potentially have people coming in trying to ask for variances to do that. We just thought for the committee's consideration, let's not even have 33 feet or anything less than 66 as an option. Let's just require 66. And if you have a very valid reason, you've got 2 acres on a hilltop that you just want to carve out, you're never ever going to divide it, and you want to run a 40-foot wide easement in there, ask for a variance, come before the committee, and it may be granted if you can prove your case. So this is how we have item 3A worded. I guess this is open for discussion at this point. Do any of the committee members have questions or strong feelings one way or the other on allowing right of way for a private road to be less than 66 feet, other than by asking for a variance?
Mr. Chairman?
Question. Yes, Supervisor Brock.
I was just wondering, is there any reason that we would have like a homeowners agreement on who maintains that road, so there's no hardship or hard feelings later on down for that private road?
And I can answer that. We do have a section later on here. I believe I can find it here very quick right here. Item G. When 2 or more lots are accessed by a private road, an agreement for the repair and maintenance of such road must be submitted for approval to the department at the time of application. Maintenance agreement shall be recorded with the certified survey map or plat. So we have taken that item into consideration, Supervisor Bjork.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any comments on 3A? Questions?
Okay. Hearing none, I'll move on to 3B. We changed the foot symbol to the actual word feet. We also, later on, we talk about measuring the length of a dead-end cul-de-sac. We thought we should probably, I guess, explain how the length of a private road is measured, because we are limiting its length. So the length shall be measured along the center line to the right of way of the nearest connecting through street. we removed the last sentence of item D and actually inserted it under item E. So I need to explain easements as they relate to certified survey maps. Recent changes to state law in the last few years have allowed a land surveyor or developer to actually dedicate easements on certified survey maps. Typically in the past, easements were always dedicated on subdivision plats. State law allowed for that. You were not allowed to do that on a certified survey map. So easements usually were done by separate document. Well, now you have an option, two options. You can do them by a separate document, or you can actually show them on your certified survey map. And as long as you have an owner certificate of dedication on the map, duly notarized by all landowners, you can actually dedicate those easements on your certified survey map. They become legal and valid the moment that map is recorded. So I'm going to read item E here. Easements for private roads shall be non-exclusive. In other words, access shall be granted at all times for public service vehicles, including but not limited to fire and police vehicles, ambulances, public utility vehicles, and school buses. Private road easements shown on certified survey maps which are not being dedicated shall provide the following note on the face of the map. Any conveyance of the lots shown on this map must be accompanied by a description for the access easement. So what is this saying? It's basically saying if you're not going to dedicate the easements, because there is no requirement to dedicate. So if you're choosing the route to not dedicate them, it's a very good idea to place a note, and actually this verbiage will make it a requirement to place the following note on your certified survey map. That way the lot doesn't get conveyed without the easement. So are there any questions on item E here? Just moving some language around to better fit the section of the ordinance. Hearing no questions, I'm going to move on. Item 4 here, line 914. Any parcels or any created parcels and or developments we had abutting a county highway shall require consultation with the highway department. As I thought about this, sometimes we get parcels that may not front directly on the county highway, but are requiring access from the highway. So I'm going to create a parcel 300 feet off the highway and run an easement into it. I'm technically not abutting the highway, but my access is requiring approval from the county highway department. So this verbiage just makes the language there more all-encompassing. The whole goal of this ordinance, as we pick it apart, is trying to close up any loopholes we may find, and this is one of those areas, a potential loophole. Under lots, 16.46, we had an item in here, F, talks about fractional results. That's very important when we're dealing with acreage, like 1 acre minimum lot size. Somebody comes in with a map that has 0.997. Well, technically it's not an acre. We're going to round it down. But we got away from the 1 acre verbiage up in item 3A. We actually thought it would be a great idea to use square footage. That way we avoid any rounding issues. If you have 43,560 square feet, it is exactly 1 acre. It's not going to be 0.997. So we just felt item F was no longer needed or necessary. So it's being removed from the draft. We had a sentence in here. Item 6 talks about contiguous buildable area. And at the end, the last sentence, we address conservation developments as being exempt from this requirement. Being the committee has instructed us to not develop the section on conservation design developments at this time. This last sentence is no longer needed, so it's being removed. Item 8, this was a section that deals with sanitation. And you can remember at the last time we discussed this ordinance, we had verbiage in here. That verbiage has all been struck and reworked. I've had several meetings with Bob Colson and his staff, and this is the language we've come up with. We're very comfortable with it at this point. Being it's been somewhat reworked, I'm going to read through it here in its entirety. So land proposed to be subdivided that is not served by public sewer and provisions for such service have not been made require the following. Item A, all lots except for outlots being less than 1.5 acres in size shall have a minimum of 3 soil borings which delineate the private sewage system area and a preliminary soil evaluation report completed and submitted to the county zoning office for review and approval. Soil boring locations shall be shown on the preliminary CSM or preliminary plat. Item B, all lots except for outlots being 1.5 to 15 acres in size. So A, B, and C here are qualifiers. If you're under 1.5 acres, you require 3 soil borings. And I'm not going to read all of this because it's the same verbiage, just different acreage requirements. So item B, if you're dividing off a lot or multiple lots that are 1.5 acres to 15 acres, we're going to require 1 soil boring be submitted. And then item C, any lots greater than 15 acres in size do not require soil borings or a soil test at the time of division or platting. So then such tests may be waived by the zoning office if, this was an oversight in our first draft. We just had items A, B, and C in there, but then the more I thought about it, we have a lot of land divisions that come in that they're splitting off an existing farmstead. There may be a home, a barn, some buildings, silos on 7 acres. They just want to carve it off from the rest of the 40 and sell the productive ag land to a farmer. So why would we require soil borings when somebody's got a perfectly fine and functioning system on their land? So item D here addresses waivers of the soil boring requirements. So item 1, if they're already served by an acceptable POUT system, or other type of system, to verify that the system is acceptable, an inspection must be completed by a licensed plumber or pumper, must have been performed within the last 36 months prior to approval of the CSM by the department. And a report detailing that inspection has to be submitted to the zoning office. If the existing system is determined to be failing, then steps must be taken with the zoning office to ensure a code compliant system is installed, or the lots that are being created are intended for uses other than residential and for which an acceptable sewerage disposal facility plan has been filed with the zoning office, or the lots are simply being created for land conveyance purpose only. So somebody's just creating a 7-acre lot to give to their nephew because they're terminal, they're going to be dying shortly, and they just want their nephew to have some property, and he's maybe just going to deer hunt on it or something. So those are areas or conditions where the soil tests are not going to be required. And then item E is all lots that do not require a minimum of 3 soil borings to delineate the POUTS area, or for any lots created under paragraph D above, the subdivider shall prominently place the following restrictive statement on the face of the CSM or plat. So it says a soil and site evaluation may not have been conducted on each lot or parcel. No plumb structure shall be erected on any lot or parcel unless the requirements of SPS 383 and 385 Wisconsin Administrative Code and the Dunn County ordinances have been met. So that just puts everyone on notice that, hey, evaluations haven't been done on this parcel, and you need to comply with this code if you ever want to do anything going forward. Item F is very important. Holding tank use is prohibited for new construction of residential dwellings on any lots. In our discussions, certainly holding tanks are allowed by the state, but Dunn County, in our draft here, we're going to take a stance that holding tanks are not going to be allowed. We're going to prohibit them for any new construction or for residential dwellings. Item G, the zoning office shall have the authority to require 3 soil borings to delineate the POUT system, and a preliminary test report be completed and submitted for review and approval by the department for any lots regulated under this ordinance that exhibit severe limitations for the placement of a system due to excessive soil type or excessive slope conditions. So that gives the zoning office the authority to require borings, even though the items above may not trigger that. And then lastly, all soil borings required under this chapter shall be conducted by a certified soil tester licensed in Wisconsin. So this is a very important section. Are there any questions on this section? Supervisor Kinnear has his hand up.
Just one quick question. You delineated an acre in square feet last time. Is it any problem in 8A here saying 1.5 acres in size, for example?
Yeah, that's a good point, Supervisor Kinnear. Again, now rounding would come into play. We're going to make note of that. I'll discuss this with Corp Counsel. We may want to convert that to square footage, or we may want to leave in item F up here. But yeah, that's a very good point, and you know, perhaps definitely an oversight on our thinking here as we put this together. But I will make note of that. Thank you. One thing, I don't know if Bob Colson is with us, if he wants to chime in, but this is potentially going to create a lot of extra work for the zoning office reviewing these soil borings, particularly on a large land division. Let's just say a developer comes in with a 50 lot subdivision and his lots are all 1.25 acres. I mean, you do the math, that's a lot of soil borings that are going to have to not only be done by the developer, but also reviewed by the county. So we did have that discussion as we were developing this section and realized the potential workload that this may create on certain projects.
Yes, Tom. Mr. Chairman Quinn, if I might.
Yes, Bob.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, we did have a discussion about that, and Tom is exactly right. Tom Carlson is exactly right. This is going to create additional work for staff, and I guess it's worth pointing out that you know, Tom Carlson mentioned, you know, that you know, on a major, you know, that there could be a substantial workload all at one time. But it's important to understand that a bulk of the parcels that are created annually are certified survey maps. And Tom, I don't know how many you estimate that maybe are created that are residential lots, but that's more of the workload. The one by one is going to be ongoing. The plats, you know, we don't get that many, but certainly that is going to be a substantial workload. So so just be aware of that. Thank you, Tom Carlson, for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, could I have?
Yes, Mr. Bartlett.
Bob, if that happened, that you ended up with 50 lot size and they all needed 3 borings, is that something that can be subletted out and then the fees just show what, you know, what it would cost to have that done, so the county so you wouldn't be overwhelmed with your staff?
We could certainly look into that, Chairman Bartlett. You know, some of it's going to be timing and availability of a person, you know, on you know, relatively short notice. And so I think, yes, that is an option, and we could certainly look into that. It may not always hold true. So depending on, you know, because these things come in and we have a certain amount of time to turn it around. The person or persons that maybe we're looking at may be busy at that time. And so, but yes, we would certainly look into that and see if we couldn't outsource that review time, if it makes sense.
Okay, any further questions on these?
And a point I just want to make early on in our discussion, I believe it was Supervisor Kinnear asked the question about our suitability standards. Are they in their own right? I think they're in section 1609 of this draft. As they stand alone in that section, are they enforceable? And we had a discussion on that, you know, we need other standards in the ordinance that speak to those suitability standards. This would be a very good example in my mind of where we're trying to enforce some suitability requirements. Number one, by not allowing holding tanks and actually making sure that these lots are all going to have an acceptable system put on them. So I just wanted to make that point. This section right here, I think, is very important as it speaks greatly to suitability standards. I'm going to move on. I believe it was Supervisor Kinnear, the last time we discussed this ordinance, this draft, brought up, made a point about the variance section, and there was verbiage in here, I guess, lacking the word self-imposed or financial hardship. So Corp Counsel and I have reworked this section 16.83 slightly. We removed exceptional or up on top. And we added in line 2, shall not grant variances unless it shall make findings based on evidence presented to it with each request for variance that. So we added some verbiage here, and you can all read this. Undue hardship shall relate solely to the physical characteristics of the property. Financial hardship, loss of profit, self-imposed hardship such as that resulting from unfamiliarity with regulations, deed restrictions, proceeding without required permits, or illegal sales are not sufficient reasons for the granting of a variance. No variance may be granted under this section that would modify or waive requirements of any other county ordinance. So are there any questions on this section? And specifically, Supervisor Kinnear, does this verbiage help address your concern with this section?
This is excellent.
Okay. Any other questions from any of the other supervisors? Okay, I will move on. We're nearing the end, and actually, we don't have any more items here. I just want to make sure we're covering everything that was brought up at the last meeting. Chair Quinn actually had a comment having to do with the maintenance of the stormwater ponds, and I don't know if you recall that, but that's one of the questions on my list for Renee Powers, Director of Plat Review, on how we may incorporate something in here, if other counties have that in there, but certainly we are still working on that section. Because I know it can be a bone of contention, so to speak, who 5 years after the development is done, who is going to maintain these ponds once they start growing up with woody vegetation, or, you know, they aren't functioning properly anymore. So that is something we are still working on. Otherwise, I believe all of the other sections, or not sections, but areas of concern or comments that were made, we addressed in the draft that you have before you. So again, I would like to incorporate any suggestions the state office has into this draft. I'm still waiting for that, but certainly would want to come back at least one more time with a highly polished version of this draft for review. So are there any questions on any sections of this ordinance at this time? I see Supervisor Kinnear's hand is up.
I keep asking questions. I'm sorry. Can we go to line 82, please?
Sure.
Up in the definitions. Environmentally sensitive area. I just want to make sure that there's no confusion. I know back in June of 18, we started talking about setting and building a map of environmentally sensitive areas. And we included the buffer here and wetlands and floodplains. Now back then, we looked at slopes of 12.5%. I have no idea why we chose that, but I don't want to be at odds with something that we've got printed somewhere in our new ordinance. It's just something to look back on. I know, Bob, I think if you're still on, you were the one that was doing the developing of this when we did it. So that's one question. I have one other one other than that. Bob, do you want to comment on that, or?
Yes, I think you're referencing to the document we made for defining environmentally sensitive areas, Mr. Kinnear. And I don't have that in front of me, but I trust that your recollection that it's 12.5 is in that document as being sensitive. This 20% is more towards sanitation maybe than what the other document. But what I will do is I will coordinate with Tom Carlson and make sure that we understand what the original document that you referenced says and what this document says, that we aren't in conflict. So yes, we'll look into that.
Bob?
Thank you.
Or
And just
Mike?
one more question to finish, please. Oh, go ahead, Dan. If you
I do have that document here, Mike. And it does describe steep slopes. It describes severe steep slopes as being greater than 20%, and then steep slopes as 12% or greater. So there's two definitions there. There's steep slopes and then there's severe steep slopes. So what we've got here are severe steep slopes, 20% and greater.
Okay, thank you. I just don't want a conflict.
And maybe we
things
should
happen.
put the word severe in line 90 there.
Just something to think about. But the other one
Yeah.
is one of our concerns on environmentally sensitive areas was excellent and very good recharge areas. And there's nothing in this document about excellent or very good recharge areas. And I'm wondering if that might not fit in here under environmentally sensitive area.
Dan and I did talk about this in the last few weeks, and we both feel that adding this under the items here in line 82 would not be appropriate in the land division ordinance. Those areas, when you bring them up, and I'm just going to stop sharing here. I'm going to open up the county website. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here again. Okay, can everybody see the county website, the GIS website? Okay, I'm going to turn on, if you go under the soils related layers, actually it's groundwater layers, and there's a groundwater recharge layer, and you can zoom in. So here's a really good example. It's a very irregular polygon, you can see, and if I expand on the left hand side here, you can actually see what the layers represent. So excellent and very good are in the green. The good recharge is yellow, fair, and so fair is kind of an orange color and poor is red. So if I'm understanding this, if it's very good recharge, it means the water gets, or the surface water gets to the groundwater extremely fast. So those would be areas that we would be very concerned about. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the very good recharge areas are excellent. Are places that are susceptible to contamination more so than the fair or poor areas. So if we're gonna, so just remember, keep in perspective, these environmentally sensitive areas are tied or are referenced in our net contiguous buildable area. So each lot in our draft has to have a minimum of 30,000 contiguous square feet of net contiguous buildable area. That 30,000 square foot requirement cannot include any environmentally sensitive areas. So if we are going to add, we have to be careful of the consequences of adding more verbiage. I don't want to say we have to be careful, but we have to recognize that anything we add under in the environmental sensitive area is also going to affect our net contiguous buildable area. So we have to keep that in perspective. So if I'm going to carve out a 1 acre or a 5 acre lot out of this 40 right here, and I'm up in this area right here, where if you can see where my cursor is, I have some very good areas there. if we're going to reference the recharge areas, then certainly we have to list what areas are not going to be, we can't, somehow we have to, list. We have all these over here. They range from excellent to poor. So we're going to have to make a determination on, are we going to say excellent and very good areas according to this recharge map shall constitute an environmentally sensitive area? That's one question I guess we would have to answer. And then as land divisions come in or landowners contact us, we're going to have to pull this map up and say, well, we've got a very good area right here. Well, where is it? Well, we don't know it. It's defined as a polygon on our mapping, but where is that on the ground? And if I'm no expert in this, but I believe this is tied more or less to the soils maps. And in talking with our land information office, those maps have changed, I believe, twice since this recharge map was put together. Now, I don't know the effect of those soils layers changing, how much it impacts the change in this groundwater map, but as far as I know, this map was developed years ago, potentially from, or possibly from soils data that is different than what we have today. Now, how much different, I don't know. I'm not a hydrologist, and I'm getting way outside my area of expertise. So if Dan or Bob have some more to add on this, certainly feel free to chime in, but this is really what we're dealing with. As far as I know, there are no other documents out there. I mean, this is the recharge map that is posted on the county's website. So that's my 2 cents for whatever it's worth.
Bob Colson, do you have any comments on?
Yeah, I think Tom Carlson explained it pretty well. I think that this would not be this would be very similar to what we typically do for a landowner that would come in and we red flag their parcel as having wetland, and in those cases, because where the wetland is mapped by the state, it's not unusual that when it gets delineated, that line is substantially different. Sometimes a landowner, it benefits the landowner, and the wetland is further away than where it was mapped, and sometimes it's closer to it. But it's something that would require delineation, and I would think that because it's soils based, and it looks like there's a line, but there's a transition between the good and the very good, and where is that transition? So in order to fully understand if it's going to impact that net buildable area, would almost have to be delineated at some point. So and I don't know also this, I guess I wasn't aware that there had been new soils maps and that this map may be outdated. But just knowing where that line is on the ground is difficult.
So one of the ways we address this in the ordinance is by requiring the 3 soil borings, which you tell me, the purpose of those is to determine whether you have what type of infiltration you have in the area, which establishes the standard for the system that you're installing. Am I right about that, or am I mistaken?
Yeah. Yes, primarily. I mean, that's the primary reason for the soil bores is where we could understand, if they're going to be able to get a POUS, a private on-site, their private septic system on site there. That's what's driving that. And I don't know that those bores would necessarily be able to, and I'm be able to identify or verify, the conditions that were used to make this recharge map. I don't know that those bores would be necessarily can be used, both of those, but that would be a question for soil scientists to see how far they'd have to go down in order to maybe make the determination on the recharge area. So.
I mean, this gets at the whole dilemma of septic systems and clustering them and the impacts on groundwater and what we can and can't do about it.
Yeah, that's the reason for the bore. So we kind of know that in the net buildable area that in fact they have a good chance of getting a system other than a holding tank. And that's what we're really making sure that the landowner, the developer knows, going into that, so that they can plan accordingly.
Tom Carlson or Bob, do you guys know of any counties or towns that have dealt with this question?
I do not personally know.
Yeah, nor do I. I'm not aware. Go ahead, Tom. I didn't mean to cut you off, Tom.
And I just want to stress the problematic portion of using this or requiring this is the uncertain nature. I mean, again, it's a polyline on a map, and where do we define that on the ground, especially when we start getting, a landowner is flirting very close with that 30,000 square feet. And now we need to have this line established on the ground. What kind of expense is that going to entail? I don't know. I guess there's a lot of, when we look at, and I'll just compare this anecdotally, I guess, to the farmland preservation map. When you look at that, we have blocks of 40s that are very defined. We can zoom in on that map and say, okay, this 40 is green, this one is not. We can't do that here. I mean, if I zoom into this 40, I've got 4 different colors right here alone. And where is the dividing line between the very good and the good? I don't know. It just, to me, it results in a lot of uncertainty. And what are we going to tell a landowner when they come in? Well, there's an area here that's designated as very good. Well, where is it? Well, it's roughly here. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of inherent issues with having to deal with the groundwater recharge capacity of a certain site. That's my personal opinion.
And to answer Chairman Quinn's question, I'm not aware of another county also that has gone to this extent in terms of a groundwater recharge map and trying to enforce it. So.
And I believe Supervisor Crenier had his hand up a short time ago.
Well, I just want to say, Tom Carlson, it's a very good argument. I see your point. If you want to delineate a wetland, you can walk out and look at it. You couldn't do that with this. You're just guessing. But Chairman Quinn also kind of pointed out the importance of it. This is a really important idea. Is there, is there someplace else, even if it's not binding, that we could put it in this document where it's referred to as being important or something to consider or something else? Because you don't want 10 houses on excellent recharge area, or well, that's just, is there someplace else that we could put it and maybe confine it to excellent, which would be much smaller parcels? Thank you.
Like for instance here, I just zoomed in on the Timber Valley development. So we're all familiar with that. You can see a large part of that is in the fair area. It's split mainly between fair and good, but there is a substantial portion, I guess, that's very good. And some of it that's very poor. So to answer Supervisor Kinnear's question, I suppose we could make reference to this in the draft somewhere. Of course, we want to get away from using the words, discouraged. So we could have a section in here that, major land divisions are discouraged from happening on areas with excellent groundwater recharge areas. But if we use that type of verbiage, does it really hold up? Is it enforceable? I don't know. I guess we can take this under consideration and see where we could possibly put this in, but I guess we're going to need some direction, I guess more concrete direction in my mind. I don't know how Corp Council feels about this, but I guess if the committee is, if this is a strong concern and you want this to be enforceable, then, you know, that's one thing. But if we're going to just have it be where a developer takes this under consideration, that's another issue. So I guess I'm looking for some really concrete direction from the committee on how you want us to proceed with this.
Supervisor Bartlett.
Yes, I think I liked Supervisor Kinnear suggestion that we just put excellent in. The examples that you've given us haven't had any excellent, and so if we said if we put excellent in this environmentally section, that then the difference between very good and excellent, I would think we could come up with a area that we could look at, and you could figure out what that area is.
So for instance, here's an example just off Lookout Road, right south of Anderson Windows. There's a development here in the city, and there is a small area here with excellent.
So flip your 2-foot contours on there once. Will they go over that, Tom?
Maybe not. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm saying is, and I think what Mr. Kinnear was getting at is that we wouldn't allow something to come in on the excellent area.
Mm-hmm. That certainly could be added to the definition for environmentally sensitive. I'm just trying to see where there are some around the county here.
I think along the river there are, Tom.
There's a huge area right just east of Lake Monoman along I-94, area of 3M. That's all excellent. And of course we have the Eagle Point subdivision here. That's all in the, so I mean, we just, you know, need to realize there's going to be, if we put this in here, there's going to be certain areas of the county that are going to be prohibited from development right north of Cedar Falls. There's a whole area in here. So,
well, if I could interrupt, there is still always the ability of an applicant to seek a variance. And it seems to me that if they're able to present a plausible approach to dealing with septic in the context of an excellent recharge area, that the committee, you know, the committee could at least hear a request for a variance and then decide whether or not a variance is appropriate. I do like the idea of limiting it to excellent recharge. If we were to use a lesser standard, it would really, in addition to being hard to locate on the ground, it would eliminate most of the eastern half of the county from from land divisions for residential purposes anyway.
I like that approach as worth looking at. Can you consider how we could incorporate that, Nick?
Yes, I've been keeping notes, and that one's on my list already.
So back to line 82, we are going to consider adding another item in here that addresses groundwater recharge.
Chairman Quinn, before we move off of this topic, if I might.
Yes.
If you move this direction, I'm looking maybe just for some confirmation or for some suggestions from the committee. We are in the we are in the throes of our comp plan revision. And so if the desire of the committee with this definition is to restrict development in those areas, is that something that we would need to pull out and say that maybe it's open space or conservation in our comp plan and not even recognize development? Or I guess I realize you haven't had time to think about this, but at least we are in the process of amending our comp plan right now.
Well, it could. It should be part of our discussion in the comp plan for sure. But I think there are, limiting it to conservation and not offering it as not requiring, I guess it seems like let's make sure we put that in the comp plan for discussion. I don't necessarily think it has to be limited to conservation in the comp plan, but because it may be that, as Nick said, there is a way to provide for development that would be appropriate and meet the other criteria.
We'll bring that back to the committee when we for discussion.
Yeah, Supervisor Burke.
On number 92, on the definitions, just for some clarification, you're talking about, if you can bring that up, drainage ways. How would that relate to ag? If you had like a grass waterway in a field, would you still have to have a 25-foot buffer? It just so it's clear in my head here. Would that be needed?
I think if it meets the requirements of F, if it does, I would ask you the question: does it contain running water during spring runoff or storm events?
And that's why you have a grass waterway to take that runoff. But now, if you're going to add a 25 buffer on both sides, that's taking out a considerable amount of ag land, and that's not the intent of a grass waterway. That's to take the water away.
Well, this isn't, this is intended for residential development, really. So at the point where you're doing a plat to divide a field that has a grass waterway running through it, you're kind of indicating that you're not going to be using it for corn or beans anymore. You're going to be using it for residential development.
And what this is,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And what this is saying, Supervisor Bjork, is that you can't use this area. We're not saying you can't develop it, but we're just saying you can't use this area to count towards your 30,000 square feet of contiguous buildable area.
So then we're not talking about ag land here, right?
Right.
That's correct. It doesn't regulate the use of land. It regulates the division of land primarily for residential development. And all this does is take you can't build your house in the middle of a gully. You have to go at least 25 feet away from the outer edge of it before you can start building. That's really what it says.
Thank you.
Anything else, Tom? Or are you?
Nope, that concludes my presentation.
Any other questions from the committee? So we will bring this back for at least one more kick at the can. It's been a good discussion, and thanks for all the hard work that the staff continues to put into this.
And then just to give the committee an update, at some point it will require a public hearing,
Right.
and then logistics on how all that's going to happen. But that would be next after the committee has put their blessing on the draft.
And I maybe just say this, one of the drawbacks of having online meetings is that we lose the opportunity for public comment at the beginning of a meeting, even though that doesn't that option doesn't provide for any real give and take between the committee and citizens. If there are citizens who are looking at this on their own or have been listening to the discussion today and have concerns or items that that they think we need to address, please feel free to contact committee members or staff, and we will take those into the discussion prior to the public hearing. Okay, we done?
I believe so.
Thanks, Tom.
Mhm.
Bob. Let's see, review the draft of the manure management ordinance. Mr. Presterbach.
Dan, you're muted.
Okay. This draft, I appreciate Nick has been doing a lot of work on this, looking at several different items, but the draft we wanted to get to you today so that you could at least take a look at what we've been doing. It does include regulation of all new and altered manure storage facilities. It does include the closing of abandoned manure storage facilities. And then it also includes the ag performance standards that are contained in NR 151. And I believe back in January or February, the committee made a decision to include those in the ordinance. And we have put this draft together. So Nick, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, at the outset, as you can see, Tom, if you could scroll up a little there. Yeah, right there. I have spoken to you before about planning for codified ordinances, and this committee has expressed at least an interest in talking about some things that are in this list, like subchapter 2, stormwater control, erosion control, wellhead regulation, wetland conservation, and so this is only in here, I guess, to demonstrate a potential organization of a chapter that regulates. If you could scroll up just to the top of the page, Tom.
The other.
So chapter 10, environmental protection and management, would be a very, I guess it's just sort of the first thing that popped into my head. But that would be a great sort of topical organization of things that, that are very broad and relate to protection of water and soil and so forth. So that's the first note, and that's just in there for you to see how it would look. And then the second, I guess my second comment is we are still working on it. We have a meeting scheduled, Dan and I do, for later this week. I think we're pretty close to where we want to be. We have a couple of things that are going to be added. There are some notes in here. I think our primary objective in providing the draft today was to give you the first look at it and then allow you to if you have questions about anything or suggestions for policies or details on procedures or whatever, that you could get them to us in your, in whatever time you want. And so that we could consider them and incorporate them or address them in an upcoming draft. I think probably by your next meeting, we'll be able to go through it in a fashion similar to what we've been doing with the land division ordinance. Does that sound right, Dan?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So are there points you want to go through today with us, or do you want us to,
if Dan wants to call anything out in particular, I guess I'd defer to him.
Okay.
For my part, I think that I guess my biggest outstanding plan is to include the contents of a manure management plan as part of the ordinance rather than just the manure management plan application. So right now we have an application and it has a lot of good information in it about the things that need to be included, but they're only in the application, and I'd like to move them into the ordinance so that it's clear from the outset. First of all, it's required, notwithstanding, it's the law. And secondly, people who don't have an application in front of them can still see what's required. And I think that's my biggest thing that I'd like to add in the next time Dan and I get together. I'm pulling together some language on that, and it should be in, and somewhere in there it's called out as a note. I apologize, but I have highlighting and notes in there to myself for looking up or adding or checking on certain things, and it's located somewhere here in the ordinance. I don't have a draft up, so.
I guess I would just like to also let you know about another part of this review. Lisa Trimble at Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection has also reviewed this draft ordinance, and she's given us some written comments, and then she went on vacation. So I plan on talking to her this week to follow up to make sure that we've got her suggestions incorporated in this draft, or in the next draft if we haven't captured all the information that she's given us or suggestions she's made.
Right, and most of those are probably better characterized as requirements. Some of them are good practices, and so we're judiciously evaluating all of them and trying to incorporate everything that we need to, and in considering things that are recommendations. Sometimes it's just a matter of verbiage, so what we've written in there actually meets their expectations, even though the reason though it's called out is that it has they use different words for it than we do. But.
Okay. So are there, the committee has had a chance to review this for a few days. At this point, are there any elements of this document that anyone would like to draw attention to today for clarification or discussion? Don't see any. Is Nick and Dan, do you think that this would be ready to come back again next week, or next in two weeks, or you want to wait and see, or?
I believe it was our intention to have it back at the next meeting.
Okay. All right.
We have to have agenda items in a week.
Yep.
And I think by then we should have a very good draft to start review on.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions or comments from the committee, then we'll move ahead with that plan. Thanks for your work. Much appreciated. Update on groundwater ad hoc committee recommendations. Dan, can you go through this?
Yes, this is the summary draft that I believe was put together for our December 10th of 2019 meeting. And we brought this to the committee, I believe, in February and then again in May. And what I've done in the last two meetings is put in this blue color things that have happened since the last time it was at the committee meeting. And I definitely would defer any of this to Supervisor Kinnear. I know he asked that we put this on here and had some specific questions on it. This range, it's real hard for me to read it, but I did, added some things just when I look at the center part there about wetlands, just the fact that the ordinance that we've just reviewed for survey has that 75-foot wetland buffer included in the unbuildable lot area. I think that's a significant, it hasn't been adopted yet, but it definitely is going to protect groundwater. And one of the goals of this was to revise the subdivision ordinance, which we are getting very close to doing. So that's today's meeting that it's highlighted there. The use of BMPs throughout the county, that continues with both land conservation and NRCS. We have quite a bit of construction scheduled for this fall now that and we've been abandoning manure storage this summer and closing some abandoned wells. I don't have the numbers on those. I know that we just got a check back from DATCAP for a well abandonment yesterday that was completed with land and water money. The comprehensive plan that is ongoing, and that was one of the things that's on here as our goal. And I think later you're going to talk about how to get public participation into that process. And then on the highlighted area there, we did have a petition to expand the town of Grant AEA, which I believe will lead to more nutrient management planning. We have people, I believe, in that expansion area that are ready to sign contracts. We've got a couple of steps to go yet. We're still waiting on authorization from 2 of the towns in Chippewa County and verbiage change to the comprehensive plan that needs to be done to make that AEA happen. But DATCAP has given their approval of it if we can get on and put conditions on the approval of getting the final documentation in. So I think that will help us expand our nutrient management planning and protect groundwater. So then we go to an educational and information campaign with interested stakeholders. And part of that is
Dan, before you do that, do you want to take questions that when you're all?
I can take questions, sure.
Maybe just to make sure, are there any, so how far down have you gotten so far down to, maybe scroll down a little bit, Tom, so we can,
right.
Or scroll up a little bit.
We should have these numbered.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Yeah, are there any questions in the first 4 or 5 boxes here from the committee?
Just a question.
Mr. Kinnear. Yep.
There's a presentation plan for the PRD in September on this spatial data. Kind of exciting. We can save it, but I just comment maybe it's nice to see that going along.
Yes, following the last time I did contact Rachel, and she is going to present on that groundwater database that she started during the ad hoc committee group, and she's going to get that presentation and let the committee see that at our next meeting on the 8th. She could have done it today, but I thought the agenda was pretty full.
So Dan, with regard to the rotational grazing initiative, anything happening on that? I know that we held it until this year to think about.
Well,
I guess
we've definitely had some interest from from landowners on individual farms to develop rotational grazing. And we're working with them through NRCS and through what was kind of, I should say, left of the RC&D grazing initiative. But we have not moved ahead with a network in the county at this time. I did talk, suggested in an email to Rachel Rushman, you know, that we were looking at a county-wide grazing network for the farmer-led watershed, but she didn't really comment back saying whether that was going to work or not with the farmer-led watershed program.
Okay.
I should follow up with her again because I did not.
Why don't you do that? Are there, how are farmers getting, are they getting access to technical assistance for grazing management plans?
Right now, I don't know if you remember Vic Price. He was an NRCS employee that retired, and he is doing some contracting through RC&D to write grazing plans, and that's the avenue we're looking at right now.
Right.
But he did have a heart attack, and he can't get out and write them, or had some kind of surgery, and he can't get out and write them for about a month. But he is coming over to Dunn County to meet with 2 landowners as soon as he can.
Okay. Any other questions in this area?
I wish I had that thing open. Okay, the comprehensive plan, I guess that's coming in the near future. As far as our awareness of groundwater quality, I put down, we shared the community groundwater study phase 2 results with the PRND committee at the last meeting in July. If you go down a little further, Tom, I don't have any changes here. We have not taken those results from the phase 2 of the community groundwater study out to any of the town boards. We would probably share the same information that we did with the committee, that chart that summarizes those results. Really hard. I wish I could go up here. Okay, on our section here, we're in a expanding groundwater testing and water sampling. We did follow up with Gary Supervisor Bjork's suggestion that there was a landowner in the town of Colfax that had donated her stimulus money, and we met with Kathy, and we looked at the possibility of combining the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers groundwater sampling that's scheduled to happen in the next 6 weeks with the town of Colfax. And Kathy was going to go back and talk to some residents in the town. We did feel there was a good value in that being a town project, but in the end, we think we'll be able to compile the results and and have more sampling in that area. So that I think is going to work out fine. We're planning to go ahead with about 30 samples in the town of Grant now, and the town of Colfax is right now going to proceed, and we're going to try to combine the results when we're finished. And then this next one on the bottom here of a county website, that is one of the next things I intend to follow up with KT to see. I don't know for sure. I know her schedule is still very, very full with COVID-19, and I don't know for sure if there's still a plan to have a UW Stout intern in development of this public health and groundwater webpage. But we do plan to proceed in that one way or another, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do it in the same manner that we had planned at that time. And I think my Supervisor Kinnear, you're the one that brought up, you know, I didn't realize until I went through this again that there's actually two different web-based applications in our goals. One here for public health, and then one up above for groundwater data for staff and for the public. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had sort of not myself remembered that until I looked through it this time. And it does seem like in terms of implementation, those two are related, and you know, we need to kind of, maybe we can talk next week about, or next meeting about how to coordinate them or collaborate somehow. And I know there is data from the state that's been suggested that we explore ways to integrate that existing data into our mapping here in the county too. So.
And then Heather has taken the results from the last November community groundwater study and from the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers and scanned those, and we've got them over to Rachel now, so she can put them in that database. So I think they'll be in there by the time she presents at the next meeting, so it will be a little more up-to-date data.
Any other questions by committee members or comments? Mike.
Well, I thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you, Dan. You know, when I see this, you know, once a month, it provides me with some memory jogging and it provides consistency. But another thing it provides is we get to see the good things being done. I was thinking of that when we listened to our intern, Kyle Bammert, today. Look at all the stuff going on. So there's a lot of good things that are being done. A comment on Rachel and what you mentioned, Mr. Quinn. Yeah, she used a technical term. I spent an hour with her back when she was putting this together. And she's taking all these different things from DNR and so forth. Her technical term was mash them all together. And that it's easy for her. I don't get it. But so yeah, she's done a great job. Now I do have one question, and maybe Tom Quinn can help with this too. The very second to last, establish a Water Resources Council to provide ongoing collaboration on water quality and quantity.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the results of this, the environmental committee from Health Done Right. Is that called HEAT? They've got a nickname.
Yeah.
What's that called, Tom?
I think that's what it's called, yeah.
They seem to have a really good handle on what's going on. They have some great leadership. I wonder if something like that might not develop into a Water Resources Council.
Right.
And Chairman Quinn, I know you've had some more dealings with than I have.
Some, and I think that in an earlier conversation that had been one of the things we had talked about, hoping could happen. I was going to suggest in that vein, Supervisor Kinnear, that maybe we invite someone who's part of the environmental part of that program to come and talk about what they're doing. I know they're at the point where they are trying to hone down their priorities and potentially allocate some funding, and maybe inviting them in to talk about how that organization, how we could assist that organization in developing into that role that we saw as necessary. That's probably the best place to direct the energy. Good reminder. I will reach out and see if that's possible. Anything else? Okay. Thanks, Dan. Two items, number 6, 2 items placed on the agenda at my request. and one is, I think we're going to deal with it also in number 8. So for the purposes of this discussion, what I would say is let's have this discussion, and then maybe we can move directly to the action on an item related to it. So this I put this on here because I've had, and I know others too, have had some expressions of concern from citizens that, well, what is the public outreach plan for the comprehensive zoning amendment revision, and how can we assure that there is really a fulsome opportunity for citizens to have input prior to the document being too codified, I did talk to Mr. Colson about that. It's one of his concerns, and so I wanted to at least have that discussion so that we make sure that we provide an opportunity. And it's a little bit tricky again because we have limited our ability to do public meetings, but at least have some discussion with the committee and about that. And I know, Bob, you and I have talked about it. If you maybe could talk about your thoughts about where you see that going to start the discussion, that would be helpful.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, first of all, I think there may be a misunderstanding in terms of what the county is intending to do. One of the comments that I received was that why don't we have public participation beforehand rather than going to the towns and telling them what we're planning to do? And that's never been the intention of what we're planning to do. We've always had the intention of involving citizens along the way. And when we get to the towns, it isn't to tell them what we plan to do. It's to share with them where we're at, to compare what we're doing with their plan to see if they're aligned, and if there are conflicts, to see if we couldn't resolve it with our plan. So I just want to be clear that we're not dictating, we're not telling the towns through this process. We're sharing with them and hopefully getting some information. But there was also concern, well, what about the public? What about just the general public and their ability to be part of the process? And there are certain individuals and that are keenly interested, and we do have a process to include them, and we've always had that process to include them in this amendment. So one of the things that further on in the agenda that's up for discussion is the resolution, and it's required by statutes to include public participation. We had a resolution for public participation back when we originally adopted the first comp plan, and in speaking with Mr. Miller, it's broad enough that we may be able just to keep that resolution, maybe embed these public participation procedures into the plan and move forward rather than maybe another resolution. But I think that we'll talk about the actual procedures when we get down to number 8. But we do have a piece that in our public participation process, that is specific to the general public, and we planned a minimum of 2 listening sessions, and we're saying a minimum of 2 listening sessions around the county, where we would notice that this is coming up. We would then schedule it at a location where we could capture a certain population in maybe the northern tier of the county, and then a second one where we could capture those interested in the southern tier of the county, so that we would hold them in different locations so that we could provide opportunity. Before COVID, all of our we've always had public comment at PRD and able to listen and to at least hear those during this process. I think going forward that one of the things that'll be a standing item I would suggest is that that the comp plan is a standing item, and so if the public needs to or wants to comment on it, that they can. We will be coming back at the next meeting with a tightened up schedule of where we're at with the comp plan process and where we're headed, and also with some stuff for the committee to review. And we will be. I'm starting to talk to the towns to start scheduling their meetings, and then I'm also starting to look at when we could start scheduling the public listening session. So I don't think that. I think there's a misunderstanding maybe in what we intended to do. But all along, we really do value input from both the towns and from the public, and we do have opportunities for those to be involved. So with that, I think I would turn it back over to either you, Chairman, to the committee, or maybe to Mr. Miller for comments.
Mr. Miller, do you have any comments?
Sure. There's a few things to share here. Number one, public participation is required by state law. That's why we have the resolution that we have from when we first did our comp plan. Number two, I will echo Bob's comments that if the resolution we have on hand is adequate, broad enough that we can incorporate a variety of public input, citizen participation techniques without a need to amend that resolution, let's not do so. Let's save ourselves the administrative step and rely on the resolution that meets the requirement of the law and allows us to do what we need to do. Number three, there are a number of different public participation, citizen participation techniques that can be employed. Bob has already mentioned some of them. The visit to the townships with a plan in hand and with draft goals and objectives is essential, because you've got to show anybody something. If you're going to have meaningful input, you've got to have something on paper. You've got to have something for them to look at and react to. Whether or not it's what ends up being adopted then depends in part upon the input you receive based on those initial draft documents. But you've got to have something in hand, and there may be some misunderstanding on certain members of the public that first we have to draft something for them to react to. But going to individually to each township with a future land use plan for that township, the outline of the future land uses, agriculture, residential, commercial, etc., and draft of goals and objectives, which will be hopefully distributed them before Bob goes to the actual meeting, so they have an opportunity to review those and prepare some informed questions, is an important step. The listening sessions or open houses are a typical technique. Again, you want to already have draft future land use plans, goals and objectives, descriptions of those future land uses for people to react to. You can also do very simple things like posting on our website the draft document, text, the future land use plans, the goals and objectives, etc., and invite emailed commentary, which will be archived and responded to and included in an appendix of the comprehensive plan. Finally, there is the mandated public hearing, which is another opportunity for input. So all of those techniques, and it doesn't prevent other techniques from taking place, are things that I think we've already talked about doing as part of this comprehensive plan. We're not ready to kick off the public involvement portion yet, because as I say, we have to have that draft in hand for people to respond to.
Supervisor Bjork.
Chairman?
Gary. Yep. Gary Bjork.
General, why can't, at the start of our meetings, why can't they just like phone in and have a 2-minute timeline? I don't understand, because we got a phone comment from Bob Colson. So why can't the public also have that chance, instead of just waiting towards the end of it to kind of have their comment as we're talking about things? You know, what is wrong with the telephone for public comment for every meeting?
I can offer, Mr. Chairman, if you would like.
Sure.
The moderation of that, the administration of that can be very complex We don't know who we're talking to. What do you do about a queue, if there is a queue? If we do it via Zoom, your page can become very populated. There's the issue of trolls. And while it's something that can be considered, with these other techniques, these other practices that we're talking about, there should be plenty of opportunity. Remember that members of the public or organizations that wish to input can always reach out to the Planning and Zoning Office at any time, in person, by appointment, or by email, or by phone call. Any member of the public or organization can reach out to supervisors at any time, same way, email or phone call. There's nothing magical about or required or intended about keeping people at bay in terms of putting input in on the comprehensive plan process until the designated public involvement techniques. We are an open county government, and that input is always solicited. But there are practical difficulties with soliciting or opening for public input at regular meetings of the committee. It is better for purposes of recording, for purposes of responding and giving meaningful responses to that input if they're done at designated times.
Mike, Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Miller and I had a brief conversation about this the other day. Supervisor Bjork, I appreciate your comment. I attended a city meeting, and they do allow comments, and they do it through Zoom. In fact, when they had a real big public hearing over the proposed condominiums or apartments over there on the east side, they had that all via Zoom. Mr. Miller mentioned trolls. That's possible whether we do this or not. And I know that people can contact us, but it's not the same as being able to say, you sat in front of the 5 members and they all heard the same thing. And it's perception too. If they're talking to someone on the phone, you're playing phone tag again. If they report to me and I have to report back to the committee, I hope I get it right. So it is something I hope, Mr. Miller, that we can consider. I think it is important, especially for the PRD. We've had many excellent comments throughout the time I've been on it. Mr. Bjork, I'm glad you brought that up, and I hope we'll consider it, because it can be done. The city does it. Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Kinnear, I appreciate the comments. Actually, what you're talking about, the public hearing, may be conducted remotely as long as this pandemic is going on, in which case we do have to arrange for some way for public input at that public hearing. It is required, and that will be in front of the full committee, which will conduct that public hearing. It is as an option the committee could talk about whether at some point prior to the required public hearing, it wants to host itself, the committee, a public listening session via Zoom or in person if the pandemic is waning, although that doesn't show any signs of doing so. So we can accommodate those opportunities if that is the desires of the committee. My overarching point is that when we do this, it should be deliberate in terms of soliciting input on a specific topic, the comprehensive plan, as opposed to general and soliciting input on anything whatsoever at any scheduled meeting of this committee.
Okay. Any other comments? I agree with all of it. And my intention of putting it on the agenda was because I felt this is an important discussion. I think it's not as easy as it was during a public comment session of a meeting, but we should keep this on the table, look at it, and consider it as an option. I think it's a good point. But I would like to maybe, if it's okay, try and clarify the input with regard to the comprehensive plan update, because that was so that's an example of a situation where several constituents, at least, contacted me, maybe others too, and said, you know, we're not sure what the process is for public participation. We don't want to have this really important process happen without an opportunity, be sort of codified before there's a real opportunity for meaningful input from people in the community who have knowledge to the topic. So it sounds like that's something that we can consider. Again, that's a process where a constituent, several constituents made a request, and we responded as a committee and a department to it. So that isn't perfect, but it does work. But maybe let's keep that option of an open comment period as a possibility. But let's get more specific about this particular question. Bob, you prepared a resolution, and now I'm not clear as to whether or not you feel like Mr. Miller, you and Mr. Colson feel like we need to pass that resolution, or do we need to look at it further? We have that discussion.
If I might,
It would be okay
Chair?
without objection from the committee if we went down to number 8 and talked about that at this point. Okay.
Yeah. So just to be clear, you know, the resolution that's before you today is we've learned a lot since the first time that we did the plan, and we've learned a lot just in terms of just, you know, how to deal with things because of COVID. And so the intent of this resolution was to be a little bit more transparent, a little bit more information to the public, but it's not a script that says that, you know, we start at 1 and we end in 10. You know, it isn't prioritized, and so when I put this together, I had discussions with Mr. Miller just about the public participation process, the procedures that are in the document before you. Him and I did not have the discussion that we were going to, that was going to be replacing the old resolution. And so I think the language is absolutely important in this resolution. Now, I guess the question that would be before you would be whether or not it's necessary to rescind the first resolution, which is very, very, very generic, very broad. It speaks to the statutes as it should, and it was passed before, and everything was fine the first time around. And so, is it that maybe these processes could be embedded in the comp plan, because they speak pretty much more detailed to what we're doing right now, but they certainly would be something going forward that probably we would do on a second amendment to the comp plan. And so, but I'd like to go back before we get into the discussion of that. I'd like to go back to something that Paul said that I think is incredibly important, and maybe is misunderstood by the general public or people that aren't maybe in tune with the planning process. Having a draft document available for people to view and to discuss, you know, and in some cases poke at and shoot a hole in or comment on, that is relevant and more important than just saying, well, okay, we're going to start with public comment and a free-for-all, and we're going to take all your comments and then incorporate them into a document. I don't know that we would necessarily get finished if we went that direction. And as long as the committee understands, so that as we are speaking, you guys are speaking to the public, and it certainly is something that we're keenly aware of on my end, that this is a draft. You know, it's the fact that it's on paper and before you does not mean that it is finalized. And this isn't us telling you. It's saying, here's what we're thinking. What do you guys believe, is part of it? So I think the draft portion is misunderstood in terms of its importance or how the county plans on using it. It's not set in stone. It's therefore it's a discussion document for what we want to do. And so back to the resolution. Yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion. I did put it on as a resolution, and maybe still needs to go forward. Maybe maybe council would like to chime in terms of whether it could be better served to it just embedded in the plan, or maybe the committee just wants to have the discussion. But we have, Mr. Miller is absolutely correct. We have a resolution that is in place. The one before you is a lot more detailed, and whether or not it's necessary, I guess that's maybe where.
Mr. Chair, if I may very quickly offer.
Sure.
Public participation should be an element of our comprehensive plan, where the text of the comprehensive plan, once it's adopted, iterates the public participation, citizen input processes and techniques that we did follow and employ. So the narrative that Bob has put together in this draft resolution should be lifted and incorporated as an element of our comprehensive plan, along with a reference to the resolution that's already on file, which means that we met the state mandate as far as the law is concerned. But there are times when general is better than specific. And the reason I would encourage the committee to simply go with the resolution that we already have is that it is more general. It gives us more flexibility in terms of what we might do to solicit public input on this planning process. The more detailed implies, whether or not it's intended to, that not only does it mandate that certain things shall be done, certain specific things shall be done, but it implies that that's all we're going to do, even if you put in language saying we may do other things. It also can create a situation where it builds expectations on certain members of the public that certain things are going to happen in certain ways at certain times, which may not be intended by the document. So to repeat myself, sometimes general is better than specific, and the work that Bob has done is important and should be an element of the comprehensive plan. But I would advise this committee that there is no need for a new resolution regarding public participation. And in fact, we are better served by relying on the one that we have.
Thank you. Is there other?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Jim.
Thank you. I'm, as you can tell, all in the learning phase here yet. I totally agree with our county manager. I like the idea of the general comprehensive plan. And while I'm reading this, Bob, and all the work you did, I think it's great. But I certainly agree with Paul that I don't like to be totally tied in. And I think if we stay with our original general one, we would be better served, gives us more flexibility, and I just want to go on record saying I agree. I think we don't need to be that specific. Thank you.
Any other comments? I have when I brought my concern forward, I was not intending that we had to write a new resolution, and my personal thoughts are, I guess I share Jim's thoughts. If we are not required to write a new resolution, I don't think we should. There's any benefit to doing that, but there is benefit to us as a committee clarifying that our intention is to provide in our plan, in our development plan, for adequate opportunity for public comment, and we will explore whatever practical and efficient ways there are to do that, and make that a commitment to the public. Is that is that a sufficient indication from the committee about what direction we want to go? I think that is the direction that Mr. Colson and Mr. Miller have been envisioning, but perhaps with a little more emphasis on earlier engagement from the public. And the reason I say that is because I think there are people in our community who have information and experience that would be helpful to us in some of the discussions we had today, for example. And I'd rather have that information and expertise made available a little earlier in the process than maybe it might be otherwise. If that's okay, if it's not okay, speak now. Okay. Okay, Bob, you is that okay with you? We won't do the resolution, but we will ask you to incorporate more specifically in your plan as you develop it, opportunities for open public access and exchange.
Yes, this language will not get lost. We will roll it into the comp plan. So it's not that this was work that we did and we're not going to use it. It's just going to be used in a different method, in a different format.
Okay, let's not beat a dead horse and move on. It's good, important discussion. So the next item, Bob, again, I know from talking to you what your workload is like, and the COVID situation has really put the workload of many of our employees to a stress point. But there has been some concern expressed about delays in sanitation permits, and I'm wondering if you could sort of share with us some of your assessment of what the workload is and how we're able to handle it and what some problems might be and possible solutions. Just a general conversation to bring us up to speed.
Yeah, and I guess, given when this was put on the agenda, the chair and I, Chairman Quinn and I had a discussion, and that to put it on here, it was my intention before he put it on this one was to come to your next meeting with a more detailed report that we could speak to about this, and we will still do that. I think today's is just a general discussion because I didn't have time between Thursday and today to get a report. So this is more of a discussion. But I just want to share with you a couple things about our workload. When COVID came about and we were directed to, if we could, send staff home that could work from home, that's what they're going to do. Part of me was saying, well, oh man, I thought I would be struggling to find work to keep them busy. So I was really envisioning that during COVID that we would get caught up on a lot of ordinances and house cleaning things that have been just put off. We're finding that it's a 180 from that thinking. That I think that people that they're stuck at home, they couldn't go on vacations. They're looking around at their homes and figuring out, well, this is a good time to do things. We are seeing an increase in the number of both sanitation and zoning permits from last year. It's going to be more than last year. We know that now, just from where we're at right now. And so that has created additional, I don't want to say problems, but opportunities maybe in terms of how to deal with this. Part of it is, my day now is a lot different during COVID than it was before COVID, because I'm pretty much the only one in the office from staff, 5 days a week. So I'm the person that is the hands-off drive-by, has to go down and pick up the permits and sort them and get them going. Get stuff ready for staff so they can finish their work at home, because there isn't information. All the information isn't available online, and so there's been a learning curve just in trying to making sure that we could still get at our workload. But with the reduction of staff, there are certain things that we aren't able to get at in a timely manner, and some things that we aren't getting at all right now, and we're hoping that we would get to later in the season as things slow down. So this discussion came about because there were concerns, that things are taking too long, and both from the sanitation and from the zoning standpoint. And I'm going to say absolutely they are correct. We are, what used to take us a week to do, we are logging about 3 weeks to get to sanitation and zoning permits, and it's just a function of resources. If we had nothing else to do except, focus only on sanitation, focus only on zoning, and not take phone calls, and people could just mail their stuff in and we weren't interrupted, I don't know that we would be that much different, but that's not the case. We are, the way that the work is coming in and with the amount of staff, that's the timeline. And so one of the things that I have done since this came about is, there's a domino effect to this. I mean, so we only have so much time in a day. We only have so many people, and there's a workload, and so we have to prioritize. So one of the things that I've implemented since last week is that I have taken all of the zoning away from Janet and Michelle, the permitting, and that sits squarely on my desk, and so that what is going to allow them to maybe get caught up on the sanitation, because we can't. There are some zoning permits that you can't issue until the sanitation is done, and so that compounds the problem if sanitation is taken 3 weeks. And their zoning permit is waiting, and now the sanitation comes through, maybe another 2 weeks before we can get to that zoning, because it's first in, first out. So what I've done is said that, all right, so we can get caught up, or at least shorten the timeline on sanitation, is that I'm going to take on the zoning. Now, you recall that last year we implemented a fee schedule, and there are two options in the fee schedule, at least from the zoning standpoint. It didn't work on the sanitation side, but on the zoning side of it, there's a general fee. And so if an applicant turns in a zoning permit and pays us the general fee, the instructions are on there that when they do that that's as time permits. I can't tell them when we'll be out there, and I speak to a lot of them personally just so they understand this, because most people talk to me before they turn in the permit. The other one is the expedited fee. So if you know that you're in a hurry, or that you have schedules, or you have people lined up and you need to meet a schedule, then there's an expedited fee, and for that, we say in 10 days that you will get an inspection. And actually what we do, because we're getting a fair amount of expedited fees, is every Wednesday now is I do schedule Cedar Corporation to come in and send them out on expedited zoning inspections. That's about 1 in 10 of those zoning applications are expedited. The balance of those aren't expedited, and so they'll be sitting on my desk. So so I'm freeing up staff's time for sanitation, which means that I will be doing zoning, which means there are other things now that we're waiting on that are going to be even more difficult to get at, and so, the comp plan, the other things that are out there, they all take time, and so there's only one of me, and so till we get either caught up or a better handle on maybe processing, which I don't think that we have an inefficient way of processing. We are looking at 2 to 3 weeks turnaround time for these applications, and I just don't see, at least today for this discussion, I don't have a solution for you folks that is much different. I do plan on looking at some options and some things, to come back and provide you with a more detailed analysis of our workload, what we're doing, how many, what's not getting done, and maybe some solutions. But I'm not prepared today to maybe enter into the discussions about the solutions.
Okay. Are there questions from the committee?
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I don't know if it was a coordinated effect or not, but I got 3 or 4 phone calls in one day from plumbers that are really, really upset. And the only problem they're having is in Dunn County. Every other county, there is no problem. In fact, Chippewa County, they can actually go right into the courthouse and go right up to the office and get their permit at least started. And I heard before from one plumber that when Janet was in the office, if it was a pretty straightforward sanitary permit, that they could get it done in the same day and leave with a permit already signed and ready to go. And the trouble is, like you said, is that the sanitary permit is the first permit that's got to be done before, say, like a new house is going to be built. And like a lot of these plumbers want to at least get the drain field done. So in the wintertime, once the house is framed up, they have some work to do in the wintertime to put the plumbing in, like during the wintertime. So, I mean, these plumbers were very, very adamant that maybe Janet might have to come into the office again. And maybe we could have them with a mask on with these plumbers to be able to go in the courthouse. We got to open it up here sooner or later. If there's a partition, a plexiglass between the staff and the public, and they come in with a mask, I don't know why we have to have the courthouse closed up like it is. I think we're being a little overly restrictive, and these people were very adamant that it is affecting their business very much. So I know we have 2 or 3 people down in the county clerk's office with the treasurer and that in the same building. So I don't know why Janet, if she's the one that can do the sanitary permits, why she can't come in the office in the courthouse, in the community center building. So that's my comment.
Is that a comment? Would you like me to respond, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, what's your respond, Bob? Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Bjork. I think that that the way that we did business before COVID was easier, much more efficient. People could walk in. They can still come to the office. They just have to make an appointment. It's not that they can't come and visit us. They can. And to have Janet coming and working full time, I guess I'm still working on. I do have her in. So before she was only in on one day, and now she's in on sometimes 3 days a week because it is. I'm still following the directive that if staff can work home, that they should work at home, and I do bring her in for those things. But I don't know that having Janet in full time is because Janet isn't the only person that reviews and does sanitation and soils. Michelle also picks up that workload, and so Janet isn't the only one. And so having Janet in, those two, Janet and Michelle, work hand in hand on this stuff all the time, and they still are. So I guess I don't see that the bottleneck is because they can't come in and speak speak to staff directly. I don't see that at all. I see that it's the volume of work that and it is up. The volume of work is up from in the past. It's the volume of work trying to address it and get at that in a timely manner. In addition to, you know, the additional workload that's up, the zoning work that's up. I think that in some cases, you know, having staff here, well, it would certainly free up my time because they could get the stuff they need right in the files. But I don't know that alone is going to solve the issue. They can, again, plumbers, they can still come in if they want. They can schedule a time if they want. It's not that we're saying you can't talk to us, but it takes an effort, and it didn't before. So so I appreciate the comments. I'm not sure that is a silver bullet, but I think some of it would help. You're exactly right.
So one more question, Mr. Chairman. How long does it normally take for a sanitary permit to be reviewed and approved? If it's a straightforward one and no like wetlands involved and that kind of stuff, or like recharge areas, like how long should it take per individual sanitary permit?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. You know, I don't know. In the past, I can tell you that, you know, that we would turn around sanitary permits within a week to 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, and that would allow us to move on. So, you know, we're another week to some plus, you know, added on to that, and again, I think it's and we don't review them against wetlands and all those things. They come in from the state approved. We review the state approved plans against our ordinance, and then we would issue the permit. So the review is restricted strictly to sanitation code at the state level and with our ordinance. Those other things don't even come into play at this time. It comes into play. It would have come into play when they're doing the soils to figure out what kind of system they would have in there. But that was on the front end. By the time it gets to the county, it's been reviewed by the state and approved. And now we have to review it against our ordinance and approve it. And so but we typically. A week to 10 days was not unusual for a permit to sit here while it's being processed.
Bob, that's been the experience over the years. That's been that long, a week.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are shorter because there's a variety of sanitary permits, and some of them don't require very much a review on our end, and some of them require more, you know, but on the average, you know, it's not unusual, you know, that it would be, you know, a week, a little bit longer before the turnaround.
So Bob, you mentioned that, because I did kind of spring this on you, all you had been thinking about it. You mentioned that you were expecting to raise this issue and perhaps offer some possible options for improving it at our next meeting. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, so I was planning because you know, I couldn't come to the committee at the beginning of the year because you didn't have any data or any information to share with you. And so I've been tracking and seeing what the workload is. So it was, I don't know if it was coincidence or what it was, but anyway, I was planning to have this discussion with the committee at your next meeting anyway. And then we had, you know, several of the plumbing communities contact supervisors and Mr. Miller, and so it just kind of lit a fire that it brought it to the discussion beforehand. But yes, I planned on having a discussion just about our workload and some possible solutions or impacts, so that the committee would just understand where we're at.
Okay, it feels like we need to do that.
We still need to do that. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, and we need to give you the time to think it through and potentially frame some solutions. I see our chair, our board chair is back on. So without objection, let's keep this on the table. And you drive around the county and around there's a lot of construction going on. I mean, it's crazy how much work there is on different projects. Okay, Gary, is that okay with you if we come back next meeting and delve into it with more specifics?
That sounds perfect. The only question I would have, is there any positions in that office that are vacant right now that maybe could be filled?
Well, yes.
Yes. I mean, that's one of the questions. That's one of the questions.
And I will go through that with you with the next time in terms of maybe the vacant positions, what those positions we're doing, and maybe what we're doing maybe to kind of do the work that those positions aren't there doing, but we're still picking up the workload. So yes, there are positions, and that would be part of my report or discussion with the committee next time. One of the options certainly would be to staff up, but that's not going to be the only option I'll present. Supervisor
Bartlett.
Sorry, I had to step away for a minute, but so if you discussed this, I'm sorry I missed it, but I was wondering about subletting some of this work for the sanitation department permits, much like we're doing the zoning permits on a fee basis. That may help get things rolling a little quicker.
Yes, we didn't discuss maybe solutions at this time, Chairman Bartlett, but it certainly is something. I didn't have time to research and to come back with anything of substance. But just so that you know, spoiler alert, that is going to be one of the things that I'll be looking at to come back to the committee next time. Would be, you know, can we go outside and look for help? And so yes, that would be part of my report at the next committee meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
Gary.
Every plumber that contacted me was more than willing to pay extra money if they could get it back in a timely manner. So that is like one comment that they were telling me.
Okay, good information. All right. Then we are, you know, we're taking this seriously. It's important, and we're going to come back next meeting with discussion about options to try and address it. Let's move on to I think the last item would be 7B, the designation of Beaver Creek Reserve as our aquatic invasive species agent. Dan, you want to talk about this? You there, Dan?
Dan, you need to unmute your microphone.
Okay, sorry about that. Back in June, one of the first things that Heather did when she came here, we had a Zoom meeting with AJ from Beaver Creek Reserve explaining a little bit about what they had done for Dunn County the last 2 years in this pilot project. That has been incorporated into state law. So I'll just let Heather say a few words about, she put this document pretty much together. I did email Paul, and he thought that we could do this with a committee motion and second and approval rather than a resolution. So Heather, do you want to say a few words about this?
Yes. So this is, like I put in the write-up here, it was originally part of the DNR Surface Water Grant program. So you would, you know, go in and apply each year, and it was usually through like education grants and stuff like that. Starting this year, the DNR has done a large amount of modifying to their surface water grant program. And one of those things is significantly reducing the amount of money for just anybody who wants to apply for an aquatic invasive species education grant to, I mean, they used to be upwards of $50,000. Well, now it's a $5,000 grant. And instead they are now doing this lake monitoring and protection program, which is meant to be through the counties, where we can, you know, sign up, say, we're going to become a network participant, and you can choose to either do it yourself and have us take on the Clean Boats, Clean Waters, and Citizen Lake Monitoring and all of the AIS outreach, coordination, and all that stuff, or we can work through a designated agent and enter into a memorandum of understanding with them. If we do that, then instead of, we don't even really act as a throughway for the money. The funding would go straight from the DNR to Beaver Creek Reserve if we ended up going with them. And they would take care of all of this Clean Boats, Clean Waters and Citizen Lake Monitoring and all of the stuff mentioned above. That's kind of the route we're hoping to go.
Okay, I could say it doesn't mean we won't be involved, because I mean, if there's an event coming up in Dunn County to look at aquatic invasives, Heather sure can be involved with working with Beaver Creek on this. But I think my recommendation would be to go with this option too. And that's what several of the counties around here are doing. I know Eau Claire, Chippewa, Buffalo are going that route. And then, you know, if there's an event or things happening in Dunn County, we would definitely be informed from Beaver Creek and we could be involved in that event. But it would give them an opportunity to set up this cooperative, somewhat similar to the Lower Chippewa invasives for terrestrial invasives. And as a county, then we would have these things happening. And there's some reasons for this, is equipment. I mean, we don't have a boat to go out and look at aquatic invasives. And it does, you know, it does have some real good opportunities to work with the community. But I think that we'll get a much better product if we work through Beaver Creek, because they've been the organization that piloted this for the last 2 years, and it's been successful, and they're actually incorporating that pilot into state law. So that's
okay.
I
think that's a good explanation. Any questions from anyone?
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Do we lose any focus for Dunn County if we go with Beaver Creek, which is focusing on 5 or 6 different counties?
They've been doing most of these activities for the past few years through the pilot program. It's, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, the county has acted as a sort of partner with Beaver Creek in their efforts within Dunn County right now. And in all honesty, with the amount of funding right now is pretty set in stone. The state legislature has each county broken down as to how much funding they're getting to the penny. And that's where that $11,764.68 number comes from. That is the absolute maximum amount of funding we can get for it. With partnering with Beaver Creek Reserve, I think we'll get better focus and more out of it than if this was something that, you know, came straight across the, you know, land and water conservation than if we partner with Beaver Creek for this. For education and outreach and stuff like that, Beaver Creek is great. They partner across all over the region, and I don't think we would be losing much of a product. I think we'd be losing more by taking in the funding and doing it ourselves than we would by not partnering with them.
It's not a big deal, but would the MOU agreement include some provision that any publicity about activities in Dunn County would include the partnership between the RLLC and Beaver Creek. Just what I'm thinking about is just, you know, sometimes I feel like the work that you all do in land conservation is not as visible to the public. It's a too well kept secret in some ways, and so tooting your horn is a good thing. And if there's some way in the MOU process to incorporate something that says, look, we'll try and convey that this activity is a partnership activity when it's done in Dunn County.
I think that exists in the MOU, and then I also think there's an opportunity to partnership with also other organizations like, you know, Lower Chippewa Basic Partnership and
very good,
and possibly
the let's look for that.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to chip in here a little bit. I know with the LCIP, they've done some work here as well. So there's, like Dan Prestabach said, they're an agency here in Dunn County that have been promoting this clean boats, clean boots as well, not just clean boats, clean boots.
Right.
And clean waters. And we're talking about all those things of teaching people to properly clean their boots as well as their boats. And if we drive by on some of these weekends and see these boats landing and going on again, I'm disappointed that I don't see anybody doing it. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I like this. I'm just very impressed, and option 2 looks great to me. I want to go on record saying that.
Why don't you make that motion, Jim?
I so move. We'll go option 2.
All right. Is there a second? I'll second it.
Supervisor Kinnear will second.
Okay. Well, Mr. Supervisor Kinnear seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Since we do not have to bring this to the county board, I think we are done with it, right?
Right.
That's the end of the agenda that I have. Are there any announcements anyone has? We probably will meet again in 2 weeks, if that's okay. Any agenda items other than the ones we've already talked about that anyone has now to bring it forward, or between now and early next week?
Chairman Bob Colson?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't know if I'll have an opportunity or time to get it ready for the next PRD meeting, but I would think that if not the one following that, I would like to have a discussion with the committee about Airbnbs and how they are either not regulated, should be regulated, could be regulated, and the impacts maybe to the county of us doing that. I think that we're getting, you know, even though we have a very green lake system, we're seeing more and more rental units and things coming, and I've had several concerns about those, and I think that that it may be a time to kind of address Airbnbs through the ordinance, but I don't know that I would be completely ready in 2 weeks, but certainly you can expect to see that coming up very soon on your agenda.
Okay. If others have items, bring them to attention of staff or myself, and we will work on them. Otherwise, I guess we've completed our work. It took a long time. I apologize for that. But I'll adjourn the meeting now. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.